Hey travelers of the strange and the sacred, tonight we take no maps, no lanterns. We follow not the stars, but the silence between them, because somewhere deep in the folds of the desert, a man sat alone for 40 nights and whispered to the moon. What did he ask? What did he hear? And why does the wind still carry his name? This is not a legend. It's not quite a dream. It's something older. Welcome to Midnight Archives. The silence after sand. They say the desert keeps secrets, but not like a locked chest, more like a wound wrapped in cloth, still warm from memory, more like a prayer whispered by a mouth that no longer remembers its voice. In the heart of the Arabian sands, where heat bends the horizon and silence hums louder than song, there lived a man without a title, without a tribe. He had walked away. From what? No one knows. But he walked without turning back. He carried no weapon, no banner, no prophecy. Only a satchel, a broken clay cup, and a hunger that food could not touch. They say he was not looking for God. He was looking for the place where God hides, and in the desert. That place is not a mountaintop, not a miracle, but a pause. He walked beneath skies so wide they swallowed thought. He slept curled in the arms of dunes that changed shape by morning. He listened to silence until it started answering back. And when the moon rose not bright, but vast, he spoke, not to worship, not to plead, but to confess. For 40 nights he asked questions no man should speak aloud, and the moon she listened. This is not the story of a prophet, nor of a madman. It is the story of a soul stripped down to its breath, sitting at the edge of everything known, waiting, and in the waiting he became something else, a shadow, a whisper, a presence that still lingers in desert wind and moonlight silence. This is his story, and if you listen closely, part of it may become yours. Chapter 1. The Last Fire in the Desert. He had left the caravan long ago, not in anger, not in grief, not to escape, and not to seek. He simply walked the wrong way one evening, when the sun dipped beneath the dunes like a disappearing god, and he never corrected his course. The others did call after him, not because they didn't care, but because they understood. Sometimes the desert chooses someone, and when it does, no rope of reason can pull them back. He walked until his legs forgot the concept of destination, until the horizon stopped offering promises, until the sky felt less like a ceiling and more like a witness. He carried only 3 things: a torn journal with empty pages that still smelled of spice, a small clay cup tipped at the rim, and a question he had never dared speak aloud, not even to himself. The question had no words. It lived behind his ribs. It pulsed in moments of stillness and stirred when the wind changed direction. On the first night, when the air still remembered heat, he built a fire. It was clumsy, a pile of dry twigs and ritual, but it caught. The flame flickered like hope, like memory trying to stand on one leg, like something that still needed light to know it was alive. He stared at it the way a child stares at a parent's face, waiting to see if it will smile or vanish. The fire offered warmth, but not answers, and even fires, he learned, grow tired of pretending to be suns. Even flames, with all their hunger, begin to doubt themselves when the stars watch in silence. So, as the wind began to shift and the embers curled inwards like sleeping insects, he let it die, and sat in the dark, not afraid, not lonely, just listening. The moon rose without ceremony. She hung low and swollen over the dunes, as if she too had come here seeking something nameless. She did not judge. She only glowed. And he, tired, salt-lusted, no longer sure where he ended, and the sand began whispered, "Are you the eye of God, or just a mirror for those too afraid to look inward?" No answer came, but something shifted, not in the sky in him. He did not need a reply. He needed to ask, And so began the first of 40 nights, not of wandering, but of returning. Chapter 2. The moon that never spoke back. For the first 7 nights, she said nothing. The moon rose like a priestess draped in silence, her face unchanging, her gaze distant. She was not cruel, she simply was present, unwavering. Like the memory of a question you're not ready to ask, he did not curse her quiet. He accepted it, because he knew those who speak too soon often speak too small. So he spoke not to get something, but to release what he could no longer carry each night, seated in the same shallow cradle of sand. He let his voice wander. He told the moon of simple things. The way dates taste better when shared, the shape of his father's hands, the smell of camel leather at dawn. He spoke of the woman who once sang lullabies to goats softly, like someone afraid to disturb the stars. She had laughed with her whole body. He hadn't seen her in 12 years. He spoke of a child he never met, a road he never took, and a name he once abandoned beneath an acacia tree. He did not cry, not yet, but his words carried the weight of someone who had been full for too long, and the moon. She listened, or maybe she didn't. Maybe he simply needed someone to seem like they were listening. Still, each time she appeared waxing or waning, thin or bold, he felt less like a man alone, and more like a man in dialogue with the very rhythm of night itself. She became his ritual, his mirror, his audience of one. He spoke of guilt like it was an old friend that overstayed its welcome. He spoke of longing, not for people, but for wholeness, for silence that didn't ache. The desert, too, was quiet, but not empty. It held him the way a mother holds a fevered child, without questions, without cure. Some nights, he asked if the stars were memories. Other nights, he asked if the moon could forgive what men never speak aloud. And though she never responded, he began to change. His voice grew slower, deeper, like sand shifting in a jar of time. His mind no longer chased answers. It listened for echoes instead. And in the mirror of her stillness, he began to see parts of himself he'd buried beneath too many dawns. He did not ask the moon to speak, because by the 7th night, he had learned something rare. Sometimes, what we need most is not a voice, but a witness. Chapter 3. The 40 Nights. In the language of the desert. Numbers are not mathematics, they are symbols, stories, sacred rhythms passed from throat to throat under stars that never forget. And the number 40, it holds a weight deeper than sand, older than scripture. 40 nights of flood, 40 days of hunger, 40 years of wandering, always just long enough for something to break, and something new to begin. So when he reached the edge of the 7th night, and the moon still held her silence, he made a vow not with words, but with stillness. 40 nights, that is what I will give you, not in search of answers, but in surrender to the question. And so began his vigil. Each night he returned to the same spot, where the dunes curved like sleeping beasts, and the sky hung like a curtain between realms. He built no shelter, he carried no time. He wore the same sand-stained cloak, and chewed on dried dates as if they contained stories instead of flesh. He stopped counting days. The moon counted for him. With every shift in her shape, he felt something shift in himself. She waxed, and so did memory. She waned, and so did identity. He began to shed, not skin, but noise, not clothes, but names. He forgot what day it was, then, what month then, why it had ever mattered. He no longer feared thirst. He drank from the silence. He no longer feared being forgotten. He was starting to forget himself, and it felt like being cleansed by something wordless and vast. Some nights he wept, but not from sorrow, from recognition. like finding an old song in a stranger's voice or a home in a place you've never been. Some nights he spoke aloud, other nights he simply breathed, and on certain nights he said nothing at all and still felt heard, because something strange happens when the world stops reflecting who you are. You begin to see who you've always been, and in that slow undoing, he found not emptiness but space, to unlearn, to become, not better, not holier, just real. Chapter 4. Salt, Sky, and Surrender. By the 14th night, his mouth no longer tasted of words, only wind and salt, the kind of salt that seeps from within, from skin, from silence, from memory dissolving. He had not spoken to another soul in 2 weeks, but he did not feel alone. He felt watched, not in fear, but in intimacy, as if the very fabric of night was leaning in to listen. The desert, once a landscape, had become a teacher. Its vocabulary was not made of sounds, but of symbols, the way the sand shifted after breathless stillness, like thoughts stirring in sleep. The arc of vultures above, patient and slow, never cruel, just waiting. The sudden bloom of a desert flower, absurd and defiant, like love arriving where no one expects it. He began to read these things, not with logic, but with instinct. He remembered the sky he'd once cursed as empty now felt full, with meaning, with memory, with messages from something greater. One night, under a moon that looked chipped and trembling, he let himself collapse into the sand face upward, arms open, as if waiting for the sky to fall into him. And he whispered, not with his lips, but from the hollow between his ribs, "If you are here, don't speak, just stay." And in that moment, he didn't hear a voice, he didn't see a sign, but he knew he was not abandoned. He was being held, not by hands, but by the space that had once frightened him most. The unknown. He no longer needed to understand. He needed only to surrender, not out of defeat, but out of reverence. And that night, he did not build a fire. He did not tell the moon a story. He simply lay down, placed the clay cup on his chest like a small, empty offering, and let the dark fold over him like a prayer. Chapter 5. The Shape of Prayer. Not all questions are meant to be answered. Some are meant to be lived through, and some to be unlearned. By the 22nd night, he no longer asked the same things. At first, it was, "What is my purpose? What does the moon know? Where is God hiding?" But over time, the sharp edges of those questions softened. They stopped demanding. They started listening. Instead of, "Why am I alone?" it became, "What is this silence trying to teach me?" Instead of, "When will I be healed?" it became, "What parts of me are still afraid of wholeness?" Instead of, "Is there meaning in all this?" he asked, "Can I sit with the not knowing and still be at peace?" Because something happens when you let the desert shape your thinking. The wind scours everything, not just rock and bone, but belief. What remains is not certainty but clarity, and clarity is quieter than answers. He learned that some questions were masks, not doors, but defenses, built to keep mystery out and echo in. But mystery does not knock, it seeps, it waits, and in those long stretches of starlight and still breath, his questions began to change shape. They stopped pointing outward and curved inward like a spiral, like a well, like a return. He no longer asked what the moon was. He asked what part of himself had always been reflecting her. He no longer asked where God had gone. He asked where in himself he had stopped listening. And in that turning from seeking to sensing, he found a kind of sacred relief, a stillness so profound it didn't offer peace as a destination, but as a presence he could carry even in the firelight of waking. Chapter 6. When God hides in stillness, it happened on the 29th night. No trumpet of revelation, no miracle carved in stars, just a silence that deepened. The kind of silence that doesn't mean nothing is there, but that everything is. He sat, as always, in the crook of his dune wrapped in the same one cloak, his cup half buried in the sand beside him, his journal unopened on his lap. No words to write, no need to, and the moon rose, not larger than usual, not brighter, but different. She didn't hang in the sky that night. She leaned closer, not in form, but in feeling, like breath at the back of the neck, like a memory you didn't summon, but needed. She didn't speak. She didn't change shape, but in her glow, something ancient stirred inside him. He felt her not as a body of light, but as a presence, a listener, a mirror, a witness. And in that moment, he realized something he hadn't dared believe. She had been answering him this entire time, not in language, not in signs, but in stillness. Each time he emptied himself of words, she filled him with space. Each time he surrendered a part of his identity, she gave him back a piece of his soul that had been missing. She was not the voice of God. She was the space where the voice of God could echo. That night, he did not speak. He did not whisper his longing or confess his grief. He simply looked at her and let himself be seen. And in that gaze, he felt everything he had ever searched for fold into silence and belong. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Crescent. By the 33rd night, the wind began to change. It no longer stuck like before. It no longer felt like something passing through him, but something returning to him, like a messenger who had wandered far across time and terrain only to whisper, "I never left you." The desert wind had always spoken, but he had only just learned how to listen. Its voice wasn't in words. It was in memory, in sensation, in the way it carried a smell from decades ago, or stirred a dune like a sleeping thought, or brushed against his face with the softness of a hand he couldn't name. And in that wind he heard his name, not the one given to him at birth, not the one carved into family or history, but the one that existed before language, before time, before fear, a name that didn't need to be spoken because it was him. The pulse beneath the persona, the rhythm before the mask. He didn't cry. Tears would have been too small for the moment. He only bowed his head and whispered back, "I remember now," and the wind, in its infinite mercy, answered not with gust or storm, but with stillness, a stillness so complete it felt like he had stepped outside the world, or maybe into it. The moon was a sliver that night, barely present, but he didn't need her glow, because something in him was now glowing on its own. Chapter 8. The voice behind the wind. They say the number 40 is sacred, a measure of trial, of cleansing, of descent before ascent. But no one ever speaks of the 41st, because the 41st is not a night at all. It is a threshold. It is the morning after the transformation, when silence no longer feels like absence, but presence in its rawest form. When the man who went into the desert is not the man who rises from it. And on the 41st night, he did not sit beneath the stars. He did not ask the moon to rise. He stood, for the first time in weeks. He stood not as someone seeking, but as someone who had found something, not an answer, not a God, not even peace, but a home within himself. The desert did not change. It still stretched, vast and merciless. The dunes still rose like ancient backs, bent under the weight of time. But he had changed. He no longer feared forgetting. He no longer needed witness. He had become his own. He did not take a new name. He did not write a revelation in his journal. He did not proclaim enlightenment. He simply placed his clay cup in the sand where his fire once burned, and whispered, "Thank you for not speaking. Thank you for staying." And he turned not back toward the caravan, not toward a destiny, but toward life, whatever shape it would take, whatever silence it would carry. He walked, not to arrive, but because walking was a form of prayer, each footstep pressing softly into the sand, like a hymn to the unknown. The moon did not rise that night, because now she was rising within him. Chapter 9. The man becomes dust. By the 39th night, he no longer knew where his skin ended and where the sky began. The line between breath and breeze had vanished. He had dissolved, not in death, but in presence. He was no longer the one who wandered, no longer the one who asked. Even his memories floated like palm leaves on water visible, but no longer anchored. There were no thoughts, only breath, only the slow rhythm of being, like the dunes shifting under starlight, like clouds remembering how to disappear. He did not resist it. He welcomed it, the great unraveling, the soft undoing of identity. He did not wait for answers. He became the question, not a question to be solved, but to be held, a shape without explanation, a silence without lack. He no longer looked to the moon as something separate. He felt her in his lungs, in the hush between heartbeats, in the still ache behind the eyes, and on the 40th night, when she rose in her full brilliance whole, vast and ancient, he did not speak. He did not bow out of submission. He bowed out of recognition, for he knew now. He was not the seeker. He was the path. He was not the one waiting to be filled. He was the vessel emptied and made ready. He was not the fire. He was the dust it left behind, still warm, still sacred. He had become not an answer to his own life, but a space in which it could unfold without need for control. And in that dust, there was no shame, no weakness, only truth. For all men, if they live long enough, must one day become dust. But few become it while still alive, and fewer still choose to. The moon remembers. They say he never returned, that one evening, just before the wind turned, he rose without a word, touched the rim of his clay cup, and walked into the dunes, into the dark, into something that was not a place, but a knowing. Some say he was swallowed by the desert, that the sands took him in like a breath returning to the lungs of the earth. Others say he became a whisper, a soft hush that brushes the cheeks of travelers as they fall asleep by firelight, a coolness that slips beneath tents just before the first call to prayer, a hush that doesn't answer questions but reminds you of how to ask them. But the moon remembers. Every time she rises over those empty sands, she shines a little softer, not in mourning, but in memory, because once a man did not ask her to prove anything. He did not demand a sign or curse the silence. He simply asked her to listen. And she did, for 40 nights. And now, on certain nights when the wind is still and the stars hold their breath, she waits. She waits for another pair of eyes to look up without expectation, without fear, just wonder. She waits for those who will remember that not all answers burn like fire. Some glow like stillness, like surrender, like the soft blue light of something ancient and deeply alive. The desert never forgets, and neither does the moon, because silence, once shared, becomes a thread woven between worlds. And somewhere, in some distant night, when you look up and feel something watching you gently, do not be afraid. You are not lost. You are being called home.